great weekend leading into our last home game, and it's we want to be able to honor our seniors in this game, and certainly playing an outstanding football team in Texas A&M. A team that is ultimately talented on both sides of the ball, skilled players, outstanding defense, ranked as one of the best defenses in the SEC. I think it's leading in total defense, number one in rush defense, outstanding defensive line. I think one of the best, if not the best, linebacker in Cooper. This will be a great challenge for our offense, and then certainly for our defense with their skilled players and our ability to certainly play a complete 4 quarters of football. So should be an exciting matchup. They always are. It's a game that certainly our last home game in Tiger Stadium. We're looking forward to the challenge, and it should be a great football game.
This Saturday morning in Death Valley, we're going to see the Tigers play against the Aggies yet again. Last year, LSU lost 38-23. This year, LSU's making a claim back to victory to proceed to their 10-win season that Coach Kelly keeps driving towards. However, there are some factors to look closely at with this game that I'll be going over with the editor of Tiger Rag, Todd Horne. We're going to be going over the firing of Jimbo Fisher, A&M's quarterback situation, and how good their defense is. One thing I know for sure is that this Saturday at 11 a.m. will be a game full of rival history coming to Death Valley to be settled. This is Camryn Conner, your host with Tiger Rag Audibles podcast, and after this commercial, I'll be breaking down all of the information that you need on this Saturday's game. I would like to thank our sponsor, Paw Paws Campers and Cars, pawpawsrvs.com, 1-800-728-CAMP, 1-800-728-2267.
Hey neighbors, we're not that far from where you are. Make that short drive to Paw Paws Campers in Picayune and see our Wildwood, Catalina, Sportsman, and Zinger trailer lines and our Rockwood and Heritage Glen fifth wheel lines. From Houma to Hammond, Biloxi to Jackson, and Mobile and Pensacola, we're not that far from where you are. Come and see us.
You're gonna love the way we deal. Paw Paws Campers City and Picayune. You're gonna love the way we deal.
Welcome back. I'm here with the editor of Tiger Rag, Todd Horne. We're going to be going over this Saturday's game against A&M. I think a big talking point right now is the firing of Jimbo Fisher, especially this late in the season, and how that puts A&M in a spot for the rest of the regular season in the bowl game.
Well, at least they're already they're definitely in a bowl game. They achieved that, I think, in Jimbo's last game with that 51-10 victory over Mississippi State. It's kind of surprising that A&M elected to go ahead and get rid of Jimbo after such a big win, but it's something they've been contemplating for a long time. I guess they just wanted to make sure that they wanted to bite off that $78 million guarantee that they now owe Jimbo Fisher.
Jimbo Fisher, I guess, is richer now because of it. I mean, he's happier now because he's off of A&M's back. But, I mean, now we're seeing Elijah Robinson, the interim head coach, come in, and we watched him last week with Abilene Christian Wildcats and saw how the A&M team handled that without their head coach they've had all season.
Yeah, and it wasn't, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Abilene Christian, I mean, Texas A&M was a 50-point favorite over Abilene Christian, and they started slow, but they still ended up with a 38-10 win, and a 28-point win is still a good performance. So they obviously weren't playing an LSU or an Alabama or a Georgia or somebody like that, but playing Abilene Christian, beating them 38-10, it's a pretty good warm-up. Texas A&M's a good football team. They have a lot of talent. They have, they've had 2 of the best recruiting classes. The last 2 recruiting classes have been among the best in the country. 2 years ago or last year, either 2 years ago or last year, it was the number one. It was the best recruiting class ever out of any recruiting class. So they've got talent. They've got skill. Jimbo Fisher is not a bad coach. They just weren't able to put things together. They're bringing in a pretty good team. It's going to be a challenge for LSU.
Well, I think, talking about A&M and how it was a 50-point favorite, but they only won by 28. I think that also has to do with, I mean, like we've talked about, the head coach situation. They're also dealing with the rocky quarterback situation that nobody really knows what this Saturday they're going to be doing against LSU.
Well, it's one thing to characterize it as, obviously it's not an ideal quarterback situation. I mean, they lost their starting quarterback, Connor Weigman, early in the season. He was their starter. He was the guy who had won the job. Then they put Max Johnson in. Max Johnson, formerly the LSU starter, transferred after the 2021 season to Texas A&M, and he performed admirably. But I think they were 2-3 under him, and then he broke his ribs, did not start or play against Mississippi State. And my understanding is they haven't made a decision on whether he's going to play this weekend against LSU. But the third-string quarterback, and his name escapes me right now.
Jalen Henderson.
Number
16.
Yeah, number 16, Jalen Henderson. He's I think completed like 54% of his passes, thrown for over 400 yards. And I don't know that it really matters whether it's Max Johnson or Jalen Henderson. They're playing LSU's defense. So
I guess we'll see Saturday. I know Elijah Robinson in his press conference Monday for A&M, he had said that it's just a day-by-day type of thing they're looking at, whether or not they're going to put Johnson in. I think I might disagree with you because I do think LSU's defense sucks. I don't think I can lie to you and tell you, like, oh, it's getting better. I know Coach Kelly had his press conference, and he seemed really happy about the defense and how they played. But I think A&M's offense is ranked 50, not as bad as LSU's defense 103 ranking. But I think that that's going to do wonders, especially Jalen Henderson is great, but he's also a third string for a reason.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure they would prefer Max Johnson to be able to play, but they're not going to play him if he's not capable of playing, if he's not healthy enough to go in and do it. But right now I'm of the opinion that a junior high quarterback could go out there and score a touchdown on LSU's defense.
I'm really curious to see how A&M is going to try to keep Daniels off the field to keep him from scoring points on him.
Well, I mean, that's a great point, Camryn. And I think Georgia State did a good job of that. Kelly talked about it in his press conference, post-game press conference, and I think on his Monday press conference. Georgia State did a great job of shortening the game, I guess, by keeping the ball away from LSU. LSU really only had 3 first-half possessions. They did come up with 2 quick there at the end whenever they managed to get a stop. But for the most part, Georgia State took the opening kickoff, elected to take the opening kickoff. They won the toss, took the opening kickoff, drove down the field and scored. LSU scored. LSU got a stop. Georgia State went back, drove down the field and scored. A&M's going to, whether they're playing with their third-string quarterback or Max Johnson, they're going to be able to do that against LSU unless LSU comes up with something, which means that LSU's offense under Jaden Daniels is going to have to score virtually every time they get the ball, if not every time. They did score every time they got the ball last game, as long as you don't count that last possession where the clock ran out. So 8 times Jaden Daniels was given an opportunity to score, 8 touchdowns Jaden Daniels led them on. That's not going to be as easy to do against A&M's defense because A&M's defense is the best defense LSU will have played all season. It's not a Georgia State offense. It's not a defense. It's not a Florida defense. So if A&M can run the ball, if A&M's offense can run the ball against LSU successfully and keep the ball away from Jaden Daniels, it's going to be a long night for LSU.
Long morning?
Long morning. Good point. LSU has to play at 11 o'clock in the morning.
I know. I don't even want to fully talk about it. I think it's insulting to put LSU, a game like LSU and A&M, at an 11 a.m. kickoff after Thanksgiving weekend. I don't even have words for it. I don't think it's worthy of an 11 a.m. kickoff. They always put the least important games at 11 a.m., and it's insulting because, This game is a huge game. It's very rich in the history and the rival between LSU and A&M. So now I'm just going to go over the history of this rivalry. Since 1899, LSU and A&M have met 60 times. The rivalry has gotten quite heated over the decades and was even discontinued after the 1995 season. It was 16 years before they got together again, and since A&M joined the SEC in 2012, the rivals have played every year. The majority of the pre-2012 games were non-conference. There was a 5-game stretch from 1906 to 1914 when they were opponents in the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Association, the SIAA. The teams first played at College Station in 1899. A&M won this by a blowout, 52-0. It was the only game before they joined the SIAA. They didn't meet again until 1906 in Baton Rouge, the first of 5 games between 1906 and 1914, in which they were opponents in the SIAA. They played 2 more times in 1913 and 1914. A&M went 3-1-1. After 1914, A&M left to join the newly formed Southwest Conference. While A&M was in the Southwest Conference and LSU was in the SEC, they played a total of 49 games starting in 1914 and ending in 1995. In a game that A&M was heavily favored, halfback Steve Van Buren at LSU was responsible for all of the points scored by the LSU Tigers as he ran for 2 touchdowns, threw for 1 more, and kicked LSU's only successful extra point attempt and beat Texas A&M in 1944 in the Orange Bowl Classic, getting their revenge from an earlier season loss from A&M. They met again in 1955 and 1956, with A&M taking both of these games. A&M was led by John David Crow, who is originally from Louisiana, and A&M's first Heisman Trophy winner. They played annually from 1960 to 1975, with all 15 games in Baton Rouge. This was the longest consecutive games played between the two teams in the series history. LSU went 12-3-1, and after 1961, LSU took the lead in the series, and LSU still leads the series today, 31-23. This series took an 11-year break and resumed in 1986 to 1995. A&M went 6-4, winning the last 5, including blowouts of 45-7 in 1991 and 24-0 in 1993. They didn't meet again until January 7, 2011 in the Cotton Bowl Classic. It was the only meeting during the Aggies' tenure in the Big 12 Conference, and the second time the Tigers and the Aggies met in a bowl game, and the first time in 67 years since the Orange Bowl Classic in 1944. This was the first Cotton Bowl Classic to ever be played in prime time in the highly anticipated matchup. Jordan Jefferson for LSU threw for 3 touchdown passes to Terrence Tolliver and ran for a score to help the 11th-ranked LSU Tigers to beat number 18 Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl Classic 41-24 at Arlington, Texas. After the 2011 season, A&M transferred to the SEC in 2012, and for the first time since the SIAA days, they would be conference opponents again. In 2012, A&M's Johnny Manziel won the Heisman. LSU's defense that year caused him to have the worst performance of the year, which included 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Number 6, LSU won 24-19 at College Station in their first SEC game matchup against LSU. The year after, in 2013, number 22 LSU won 34-10 in A&M's first SEC road loss game against LSU, and prior to the 2014 season, the Southeastern Conference rearranged LSU's schedule, moving its traditional year-end game versus Arkansas to early in November and placing A&M at the end of the Tiger slate, which we all know now. In 2018, I think was such a huge game to think about whenever you think about how big this game this weekend is. This was actually the first game that I was fully locked in for. All 5 hours, I might add, all 5 hours for a football game. 2018 junior quarterback Joe Burrow lost to A&M 74-72 at Kyle Field. This was A&M's first win over the Tigers since 1995. This game also set an NCAA FBS record for the most points scored in a single game and tied an NCAA record for playing in 7 overtime periods. Due at least in part of this game, the NCAA adopted rule changes prior to the 2019 season that required teams to go for 2 if they get a touchdown in the second overtime. Previously, this wasn't required until the third overtime, and it also required teams to rotate 2-point conversion tries starting in the 5th overtime. Prior to the 2021 season, the rules were further changed, so now starting in the third overtime, they have to go for the 2-point conversion. The following year, in 2019, LSU had their revenge. They met the Texas A&M Aggies in Baton Rouge with Joe Burrow in his amazing national championship caliber offense and defense, wearing his famous Burrow jersey on his senior night, beating the Aggies 50-7 to wrap up an undefeated regular season. The Tigers went on that year to win their 4th national championship. And there's a lot of parallels people can make about Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels with the top-of-the-line offenses. Both struggled their junior year and came back even stronger and better their final season at LSU. Last year with junior quarterback Jaden Daniels, LSU lost to A&M 38-23 at Kyle Field. This year we're looking at a senior, more mature Heisman Trophy talk winner, Jaden Daniels, and the number 14 Tigers to come against an unranked A&M team at home in Death Valley.
People come from everywhere to Pawpaw's Campers and Cars.
All at Pawpaw's Campers and Cities, Pawpaw's Campers and Cars, the people.
And we're going to let it go for I forgot.
Take the whole family over to Picayune. We got something for you. All right. What else we gonna say?
PawpawsNicePrice.com.
That's probably all we need to say.
All right, well, that's it for today's episode. I would like to thank Todd Horne, the editor of Tiger Rag, for coming in today and giving his thoughts on this Saturday's game against A&M. I hope you guys enjoyed the little history lesson that I gave y'all. Like I said, it's going to be a huge game, very rich in history. A very interesting 11 a.m. kickoff choice, but you got to do what you got to do to go support your team. So I will be back later this week with more information. I would like to thank our sponsor, Pawpaw's Campers and Cars, pawpawsrvs.com, 1-800-728-CAMP, 1-800-728-2267.